Good morning. I want to start by acknowledging that our community continues to struggle with the tragic loss of life that occurred last week. I'm deeply saddened by the fact that a mother lost her life. The emotions of the past weeks, anger, sadness, fear, and frustration have been felt deeply across our community. We have always emphasized here that we are stronger together, and now more than ever, we must live by that principle. Lastly, I wish to express support for our local law enforcement and other officials who are dealing with this tragedy and seeking to return the sense of safety, support, and belonging. As I reflect back on the season, it's obviously a disappointing one when you're watching football this weekend and you're not in the tournament. That's not the standard we've set here for ourselves. It's not the standard we've set for our fans. At the same time, I have a great deal of respect for how the season finished, how they finished out the season with winning 5 games with once eliminated from contention. And that's a great credit to KO, his staff, the core group of players that we've assembled in this locker room. Just a great credit to them for how they finished. So in that sense, we had a lot of things that we showed flashes of the team we wanted to be, but ultimately we weren't consistent enough. And that's what we're going to try to do, find that consistency, find that ability to turn flash into reality over the course of a 17-game season to get us where we want to go. I'll always continue to stand up here and thank our ownership group, our coaching staff, our players, our football operations staff who do an incredible job of handling this season, the long time away they spend from their families, and just doing things to uphold the Vikings standard. Great credit to them, and ultimately it didn't end up where we want to be, but that doesn't mean that they didn't do everything they could for this organization. With that, I'll take questions.
How do you look at the quarterback room where it stands right now, as opposed to where you think it needs to be week 1?
I think in my conversation with Kevin and just doing the analysis we've done, we've set a standard here for winning when we've gotten a certain level of play in that position, allowing us to be explosive enough on offense to set the table for how we play defense, special teams, and different things like that. So our conversation is about returning the room to a competitive, deep enough standpoint to get that play style, that ability to win games for 17-plus games this season. So that's how we focus on our conversations.
How do you get there?
Obviously the season just ended, so we're focusing on obviously the people that we have in the building first and how JJ how he's matured and how he's gone on through the season. You talk about his first 6 games and how they went, but the last 4 games, great increases in completion percentage, touchdown, interception, 4 wins obviously, and different things like that. Playing up in the pocket, all the different things that we talked about him improving. We're trying to make sure that we set the table for that first, start there, and then kind of use that mindset to kind of fill out the rest of the room.
Kwesi, Kevin was talking about the balance of supporting Brian Flores, finding a coaching job, and also being aggressive to keep him.
Yeah.
As a GM, if he does go to be a head coach somewhere, personnel-wise would be a challenge for you, don't you think, because of just how unique his style of defense is? Does that present a bigger challenge for you, do you think, with personnel that you have to maybe change the whole defense?
There's always, when you bring in a new coordinator, there's always that carryover, possible attrition versus, loss. In a sense, he is unique, and he does have a unique play style. But if you really look down deep, what is flow value, versatility, physicality, the things that matter in a deep, good defensive football, setting edges, tackling, different things like that everybody values. Flow kind of takes those pieces and puts it together in an artwork that's different than most. But the core colors that are part of that painting are a lot of people, share those same things.
Kwesi, when you look back, you talk about always evaluating your own decisions, kind of grading yourself. When you look back at the quarterback decision from last year, the money that was spent to save but not franchise Sam, just how do you weigh those things and how the results turned out?
You spend a lot of those nights, obviously, you're up in these decisions and they're uncertain, and you're trying to make sure that you don't lock yourselves into what you did and thinking that it's always right. And so there's those nights that you wake up and stare at the ceiling and ask yourself. But I always go back to the process and what we thought at the time. It's easier to kind of go and be revisionist and results-based, but going to really think through what we had at the time. I still understand why we did what we did. The results maybe didn't play out the way we did. We wanted them to, but ultimately, I think that at the end of the day that we could have executed better in certain places. And I'm not going to say it individually in terms of a particular player, but just executing better, knowing what the room was play style-wise, experience-wise, and just kind of really put together a better combination of people, collective in that group. That's kind of the thing I probably focused on the most. And then also ultimately understanding how we play and win football games. Again, I'm not going to get into the specific how we group it, but we've won a high clip of games over here since we've been here, when we've gotten a certain level of play, a certain style of explosive plays. These are things we've talked about, but a lot of times points aren't made until something is removed. And then you kind of see the complex system and how when you move that one variable, how that one variable affects other things, and really seeing how when we weren't that explosive, how teams played us and how they kind of got to box a different fight. And when they got to box a different fight, how that impacted our defense and their ability to create turnovers and win games the way we thought we could win. So that was really just a great learning experience that tied into the quarterback discussion, and those are things we'll carry with us going forward.
Hey, how big was the loss of Jones ultimately to the Colts, Kwesi? And was there an overconfidence within this building that he was going to come back because he had signed here after the Giants let him go on the run?
I don't want to say overconfidence, but I do think him being here was something that we kind of considered and thought would impact his decision. But ultimately, there are free agents, and to your point, learning lessons. I think execution-wise, you have to treat it as such. No matter what the conversation is or relationships are, free agents are free for a reason, and they're allowed to vet all their options. And ultimately, we could have executed better around that.
Do you want JJ to be the starter in 2026?
I don't know that's. I want the Vikings to achieve our goals, and I think one of those goals is to make playoff runs and do different things like that. I think he's the character and ability to be the person to do that for our organization. If I say that in 2026, that kind of binds us into a certain area. The way we've set this team up, we built this core to really, like we've always talked about, give ourselves multiple shots at it, because you never know when there's going to be a year where the field's a little bit wide open and you can make that run. And so that's what we're really focused on. Talking about whether it's this year or next year isn't really my immediate reflection. It's my job to really bring that deep competitive room that we've talked about to the Vikings.
Kwesi, do you think there was a misevaluation in how ready JJ was to be the guy this year?
We talk about a lot, and that's a great question. We talk about a lot, the path of young players isn't linear, and you ultimately don't know how the first 4 or 5 games are going to go. And we have obviously a lot of historical studies about what that first few games are going to look like, or that first year could look like in a sense. And ultimately, that's why we tried to build the team, knowing that those growth pains could come to be able to overcome them and withstand them in a certain sense. Ultimately, a lot of this job, our GO call it fast eyes, and this isn't a fast eye decision, but in a perfect world, you would have had a full sample. 3 years of watching him play in the NFL before. That's not how this works. And sometimes you have to go on incomplete information. And the information we had was all good, but it was admittedly, incomplete and small sample. So ultimately, we trusted in the information we had. We trusted in our coaches. We trusted in the team around him to do that. And so it's hard to really, when you think about that and then go look back at the season, as I talked about, you saw the improvement at the end. You saw the flashes of the player we thought he could be. So in that sense, I can't say that we were overconfident. Maybe the timing didn't work out with other aspects of our team, whether that be injuries or different things like that. But ultimately, we're comfortable with where we are, and we're excited about where you can go.
Well, you mentioned the character and the ability with JJ. I guess how do you feel about his ability to be consistently available with all the injuries he's had so far?
Yeah, that's ultimately something that the story will be written. Availability is a skill, as they say, and you're talking about a player who's incredibly tough, didn't miss games in college, and that was one of the things we talked about. We went to the people in the building in Michigan. They told us the things he fought through and different things like that, and that's really not different than the player we've gotten here, the type of player that finished the game when he had a knee injury that would take him out for the season. And so ultimately, that is something we're mindful of, given just how it's happened. We're in control what we can control, though. How do we get him right from a mechanical standpoint, from a decision-making standpoint, to kind of protect himself and try to convince him to protect himself? But that mindset of me versus them, I'm going to get this last yard. That's also what the great ones have. So for me to sit here or anybody else to tell him to be a different version of himself, when that's kind of the stuff that we want to be there in the end, it's a delicate balance. But I know that he wants it more than anybody I've ever been around, and he's got an off season where he's going to have time to not rehab an injury. And so we're excited to see what development he takes and really the steps he takes towards being available for us.
And that's great, but when the fact that he missed time and missed games with 3 how much do you guys have to get insurance now? Like, if you get a backup and he plays and does not play well, JJ's hurt again, that's on you guys more so. So, like, how important does that backup now become to be a viable starter, just in case he goes out?
Yeah, and then that goes to what I was saying earlier, the collective, the deep, talented collective group that gives us the ability to be our explosive selves and win games at the clip we want to keep winning.
Kwesi, as you're figuring out how to address the quarterback room, how much of that process is how you talk to free agents about how much of a chance they have to win the job? I think with Daniel Jones, it probably was that factor of saying, okay, where do I have the best chance to get myself in the field? As you're talking to free agents this offseason, or whatever you end up doing, how much does that play into the way you characterize how open the competition will be?
Yeah, my conversation with agents aren't typically that they're focused on that. That'll be a lot just kind of the player's perception of kind of the outcome. But we're going to be honest, as we always are. We're very transparent in our free agency conversations. We want to be able to play a certain style of football over 17-plus games, and we're going to create a competitive environment. It's my job to bring in a group of people to do that. It's Kevin's job to decide who comes out, splits the reps, all those different things. That'll be Kevin's job, and at the time they're allowed to talk to us, we can talk to the player about that. But for the most part, we'll focus on the opportunity the Vikings provide, the teammates around them, the great resources we have here, and we'll leave it to that.
Kwesi, from a team building perspective, with Christian Darrisaw, like, to what extent are you confident or concerned about whether he can become that every down 17-game a year guy again following this injury?
Yeah, he's a year removed from that injury, so time is on our side in terms of kind of getting away from that injury point. Another year of rehab, strengthening, and different things like that. But obviously, at all parts of our team, we've seen how important he has been to our play. And so when we're addressing things in the draft or for agency, we have to be mindful of that. And I don't want to say insurance, but we're always trying to have a roster, aspirationally as a GM, when that first guy goes out, that next guy comes in and is as good as the guy. Is that reality? No. But that's the mindset we got to take, and that's a position we probably got to be more mindful of that.
Do you wish you had brought Wentz in? Did you training camp and let him be a part of it? Where does he stand?
I don't know that I wish many things since becoming an adult, but I think, I understand where that question comes from. I don't know that him coming here when he came here affected how he played. I think our offense moved the ball pretty well in the 3 games he played before he got injured. He's a guy that even when he's healthy doesn't need a lot of reps. His experience, his intelligence level, his ability to see over the defense, which was great because when he was here, it gave Brosmer a chance to get reps and different things like that. So I don't know that is something I look back on as a big mistake, but it's a reasonable thing to ask. Is earlier some small probability of that the odds could have been better? I'll certainly, I can't deny that that's the case, but just thinking about it holistically, I don't know that that's some big thing that we're regretting.
Does he have an edge because he played in the system, if he gets healthy? Or?
For next year. We loved our time with Carson. All the things we talked about the first time he walks in a room, you understand why he was the 2 pick. I'm sure you guys all know that from just walking next to him. So we'll have those conversations at free agency, but he's been in great contact with us. He sent us a great text. You don't always get texts from players in exit interviews, but he's a uniquely intelligent, caring, loves the Vikings player. It is an advantage, certainly, that he's run our system. Kevin knows what it's like to go through a game plan week with him. Then also the results. Again, we moved the ball well before, obviously, the unfortunate injury that he battled through in those last 2 games. I don't think is a fair reflection of how good Carson Wentz is while he was injured.
Kwesi, how much could Jordan Addison's recent arrest impact the wide receiver room, just considering how you guys felt about J.O.
We just kind of found that information, so I don't want to speak too deeply about it. But obviously, any decision you make with Naylor or anybody else is about the short term and the long term of that room. Jordan is unique because 99% of the days that Jordan Addison is a Viking, he is a joy to be around. He is incredibly intelligent, confident, responsible, and then it's like all of us. It's what are you like on those 1% of those days? Is it the type of thing that draws attention or not? And obviously that's something we have to consider when you're talking about long-term ramifications of a contract extension and different things like that, or letting somebody like Jalen Naylor leave. And we'll have those conversations, obviously, just a few days after the season, and obviously this event just happened. We have not. But, always supportive of Jordan Addison. We'll continue to fact find and see what actually happened, and then we'll have those conversations in the future.
You spent so much of last offseason working on the interior of the offensive line that you never really got to see much of that
Yeah.
take shape. How does that kind of affect the comprehensive evaluation and evaluate the whole offense given the role that that position has on the rest of the positions?
Yeah, I think we did the lineup we thought we'd have play 83 snaps to get together. I think that's the number. That's not what I expected, and as much variance as you could maybe predict. And you want to be of both minds. I stand up here, I believe, partly because I've been accountable my whole life, and I don't think you run from opportunities to get better. So I want to always make sure that I'm doing that. But you can also point out context that might be outlier, and what would that look like if they did have the ability to play together and that type of thing. And also give a credit to a lot of the guys that filled in for him. I thought Blake Brandel, for his first time at center, really started to show an arrow up and played solid football. Michael Juergens got better as the season wore on. So it is something we think about, and you're trying to make sure that you don't, let the outlier kind of thing rob you of the lesson. That's really how I would try and phrase it.
Kwesi, what will the synergy between you and Kevin look like as you try to navigate the future of the quarterback room?
Can you be more specific when you say the synergy between Kevin and I?
In terms of how you guys will talk about plans and actions moving forward to have the talented quarterback room that you will.
We'll continue. One of the best things about us is we kind of like a language that we share. Just me learning him through the years and what we need, and my ability to kind of go through and point out things from my background, and we'll continue those conversations. But I think we are extremely aligned on, and he's probably always known it, but seeing it up close, kind of some of the things we saw this year about what we need, and we're kind of both aligned and focused on getting that here. And obviously our options are our options. We'll evaluate them as we always do as a personnel staff, as a coaching staff, and get aligned. And then it'll just be about risk, reward, relative value, all those same things. Kevin will be chief in those conversations, chief among my thought partners in those conversations, as he always is, because I value his opinion, and I think it's important at that position.
To put a finer point on it, who will make that decision?
I don't know that that's. It's like I probably said before when I think you get asked about who's control over it. If you're asking those questions, I think you failed in the beginning. I don't know that our relationship in terms of our collaboration has ever been a way that's something that has come up. I understand where that question comes from. But you're talking about coach and quarterback and GM. That's the alignment you need in an organization. I don't know that can be something that's done in a fractured way.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.